Charlotte, it's lovely to meet you. And it's great that you've offered to do this interview to give us some insight into your world, a world that's kind of derived from being here at the Northern School of Contemporary Dance at some point in your career. And
Yeah.
actually, you have a great relationship with us. And I guess that's really what we want to start with, just your time at Northern School of Contemporary Dance and when that was, what happened, how was it for you?
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks for inviting me, first of all. It's a real privilege to talk about, to reflect back and to share that and to feel that it's of value. Yeah, I have to say I had an absolutely brilliant time at Northern. I really did. I had been so lucky to grow up in Suffolk, and so I was part of Suffolk Dance, led by Cilla Dyke at the time. And she was quite, such an artistic force. And so I had access to some really key figures. I'd worked with Janet Smith through the youth company Splinters that Cilla had initiated. I'd worked with Jill Clark. She choreographed on us, which was like, I can still remember it so vividly. I mean, it really was a transformational moment. And the other key person was through Splinters Dance Company, the youth group, I got to work with Stephen Long, who is not with us anymore, sadly. Well, obviously Jill isn't either. And he had been teaching at Northern. He'd been teaching ballet.
That's right, yeah.
And he came to make a piece on our youth company, and he was not well at the time. And so actually he stayed with me and my family rather than in the hotel. And so I really developed quite a close relationship with him. So that is why Northern was my first choice. And by the time I got there, he had left. But I used to go out and visit him and his partner at weekends and walk in the countryside around there.
Charlotte, sorry, just to elaborate, you've touched on some quite inspirational individuals. I mean, that have definitely informed you in terms of you deciding to come to the Northern, and that seemed like it was a privilege then. I mean, is that something that you'd agree with, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different world now. I think through Cilla and the youth company and Suffolk Dance, we were working with some of the leading artists at the time. I mean, there are many more than I've mentioned, but those three, Janet, Jill, and Stephen, were people that really touched my heart. And as a young artist, I think that's what I was supported to feel. I really felt like an artist, unformed, but there was real integrity to the youth program at that time. And it was not so much about training, it was really about artistic practice.
Excellent.
But, yeah.
And we're not quite in this conversation at the moment, just jumping this far forward, but it really does feel as though that becomes integral because obviously what you've gone on to do, but we'll come on to what you've done. Are there any times in your time at Northern that you felt that there was really kind of, in addition to what you've just expressed, the experiences whilst you were here that was influenced?
Yeah, I mean, the whole vibe right from the audition day, it had a really kind of family community feel. And I loved that it wasn't too big. I loved that, I know things have changed, but it meant that we could have relationships with even my first year, I was in third year choreography works, student works from the third year. So there was an intimacy about it and a sort of energy of shared, we went to see every single show that was on in the theatre. This was pre-degree training, so that I did a diploma.
Yeah.
And it was under Nadine Senior, so it was 1991 to 1994. So, and actually I have to say, Nadine, even though I didn't spend a lot of time with her, was a huge influence on me. She taught us for teaching practice. And because, I will talk about this later, but because two other founder members from Canduco also trained at Northern, we shared, we had all experienced a teaching practice and a kind of ethos and approach from Nadine that actually became the bedrock of Canduco's approach to learning. So that was key for me. What else was key? Alison Beckett was the vice principal and the mother of the school at the time. And she had a disabled son. And so me and these members that became founder members, Sue Smith and Kuldeep Singh Barmi, we helped run dance sessions for this youth company, disabled youth group that Alison Beckett's son was in. So I was already very much I was always interested in diversity. I was always interested in dance in inclusive and diverse settings, yeah. So they were key, as were Kathy Burge, the tutors at the time, Paul Claydon.
Wow.
And Namron, I mean,
Yeah, I'd be surprised if any student that's gone through the Northern School would not actually mention him as a key individual.
Yeah, he was really key. And also my relation, when I realized he had a very direct relationship with Celeste, we became very, I just loved his energy. I mean, I remember the first class now, I had to, hold a contraction in floor.
In what? In second position?
Second position on the floor, hold a contraction, which I was hopeless at. And he picked me up and threw me to the pianist of the time. It was probably his kind of, signature piece, but it worked for me. It worked for me.
Amazing.
And sorry, just one other thing that was, I think, shaped it was that we were an unusual year group. By the third year, there were only five other women and about 18 guys.
Wow.
And because it was pre-degree course, there were a lot of, I believe, like free places for people from the community. Yeah. So there were a lot of guys from Chapeltown in my year, which really shaped the energy, the creativity, the whole experience. Yeah.
Sounds amazing. I mean, it was amazing. It really was. Yeah. Standing on the outside, listening to all of that as well, being in the industry at the time, you could feel the vibrancy of what was happening. So,
and I remember you, Sharon, I should say that too.
Yeah, I was hanging around the doors as well. I mean, obviously my history here is very different, but yeah, back to you though. But I do want to know how you found your feet once you graduated, and what happened, what captured you, and what happened.
Well, I must say it's a bit of a fairy tale story, so I'm not sure how useful it is to current graduates, but because of Alison Beckett and this connection we'd had with this Disabled Youth Centre, in the end of my first year, I was allowed to take a week out and do a residency at Yorkshire Dance Centre that Canduco were running, but they weren't Canduco yet. It was Adam and Celeste and a couple of other guys who had been exploring movement together. And we did a week's residency. We created a piece. We performed it at Northern. And the crowd, there was a standing ovation. It was a really significant moment for everyone in it and everyone witnessing it. There were about 20 of us in this. And then we were invited to develop that for Ballroom Blitz at South Bank that summer. And then we created Canduco after that. And so I actually left Northern at the end of my first year.
Wow.
In my second year, because Canduco was like happening. But by Christmas, I realized that even though it was so exciting and where I wanted to be, I realized that if I didn't actually do a full-time training, I wasn't going to be in the game for very long. I was already picking up a few niggles in my body. And I thought, hang on a minute, I want to be doing this for the whole of my career.
Nice.
So I went back at Christmas with my tail between my legs and picked up the second year with the same and completed the training, which I'm really grateful to. But I did miss those first 2 years when when Canduco was working with Siobhan Davis, with Emlyn Clade. They made that film Outside In, which went all over the world. So I missed some key moments, but it did mean that I actually had a solid training to build on. But the reason I say all this is because Adam and Celeste then came to the graduation performance at the end of the 3 years, and they took me out for dinner and they offered me the job.
Amazing.
So, you know, it was beyond what anyone could dream of. And so, yeah, I went straight to London and got on with it.
And let me just ask, you're still in the job? So how many years is that later now that you've kind of...
Oh my goodness. So when it was 1991 when we were really forming it on the back of that residency. And then I went back to train, and it was in 1994 that I, you know, got a contract and started. And so now what are we in? 2023, yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Congratulations. I think that longevity is clearly rewarding. So yeah, it's not everything that's shiny at the beginning is there for everyone. So you clearly made that decision to make sure that you've actually got some sustainability around what you're doing. That's really important.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have got some sort of news around that, which we'll come to.
Okay. Well, before that news comes in, why don't we just go in a little bit into the kind of how that journey of your career developed? So you were given the contract in 94, obviously excited and very well respected, because I don't think it sounds like a fairy tale, but actually you put the graft in. So it wasn't just something that was handed to you, that you obviously did the work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there was something really genuine between, you know, once we'd done the community work, there were a core group of 7 or 8 of us that were really very passionate and very committed to genuinely exploring, working out together how we can create something new together that we couldn't do without each other. So it was a very strong connection that I felt part of. So it did feel right. So yeah, so I danced with them for the first 8 years. And yeah, I mean, I have to say, I know the 20s are great years for all of us, but I have to say they were some of the best years of my life. And the excitement for that work, the appetite for that work to really bring all sorts of experiences, stories, physicalities, energies to the stage. And because Celeste had all those connections from when she was with London Contemporary Dance Theatre, we had access to some of the, you know, leading choreographic voices at the time. And we had a lot of support, you know. I mean, this is the thing, it's a very different climate.
Yeah.
So we were touring internationally very, very quickly. But there was always, you always had your feet on the ground, which is probably not the right expression, but, you know, we'd be working in a special needs school for a couple of weeks, creating work. And then we'd be in Sydney. You know, it was really, because alongside the performing, it was really important that we were always doing educational work and sharing our experiences wherever we went. So it was always varied, and that's why I had no desire to be anywhere else in the world. I just wanted to keep doing it. And actually, when we left, I didn't want to leave. I only left because all my mates left. Okay. I have to admit that I actually wanted to stay. I wasn't done. I was the youngest of the company. And we naturally came to a kind of time where we all wanted to move on. And I didn't have the confidence to say, you know what? I don't. So
there is a turn in the twist in this story, really, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because we're talking today in 2023, and I'm talking to the artistic director.
Yeah.
So what happened?
Well, I did leave, but I stayed close. So I always stayed involved in some of the community projects, the residencies, the teaching. Also used to teach company class whenever I was asked. And it really just shaped everything that I did afterwards. So even though I then went I was a faculty member at Laban, at Trinity Laban for 10 years, and also taught at the place at London Contemporary Dance School for 10 years. And I was really passionate about that. I was really, I brought all of my experience to that. And also I was, at Laban, I was working within a new, really progressive program under Jill Clark and Kirsty Alexander.
Oh.
So I really felt at home there, actually. Because they were really, you know, introducing a more somatic approach to training at the time. And that was where my heart was.
Mm.
So, and of course, how that then manifests in performance, choreography, techniques of all kinds. So, but during that time, I would go off every holiday and do, I guess, inclusive projects. Like I went to Bangladesh with a disabled friend and worked in the spinal injury hospital there, creating work for a couple of months. I went with another disabled friend that I'd met through Canduco to Colombia and did a huge nationwide project with landmine victims, because they were, you know, they'd had some terrible times there, and they were trying to put positive energy and creativity into the situation. Yeah, so it's just been a driving and shaping force through my whole life, that kind of, what can we do together, you know?
Incredible. I have a performance crew, as you know, and sometimes when I think back to the amazing things where some of it's accidental, some of it is constructed, some of it is there's a need to do this. That's absolutely about who you are. And it sounds like you've had that wrapped around this opportunity that landed when you were finding your feet as a young individual, and it stayed with you.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it was really, I you know, being in those environments where there's a genuine curiosity and sort of mutual learning, you know, like there's the stuff we do know, we've got our own experience, we've got our own desires and artistic appetites, but there's also a whole load of stuff we don't know. And that combination of genuinely working it out together, that trust and transparency and exploration, has just kept me going the whole time. It's still what keeps me going.
Mm. You just mentioned that trust and curiosity, and I think bringing it forward to today, it's one of the things that I find as I communicate with the students. There is the real curiosity to go out and experience something different, or to try something that they've never tried before, and not judge it before you've ever actually arrived there. Because had you done that, or had many people decided that was the way forward, I don't think a lot of things would have happened. And I'm sure you're still experiencing that on a day-to-day basis with the company.
Yeah, I think that's key, isn't it? I have to say, whenever I've come back to teach at Northern, I do feel that energy and openness and curiosity. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's key, because it's about how and where we meet each other, isn't it?
Mm.
Whether that's, you know, in duet form or out in the world. And if we think we know what's going on before we fully open ourselves to it, we're shutting a whole lot of stuff down. No, I think openness, curiosity, listening, a desire to really connect is key to me. And it's also what supported me. I mean, so my connection with, I've met so many incredible teachers and performers and makers along the way. So that's what it's about for me. Yeah.
You've almost answered the question around the advice I would ask you, what advice would you give to a young person today that's thinking about it, or even that's in the industry kind of thinking about what's possible? And my part two of that is also, what would you want people to say about you in terms of your legacy and how you've influenced and informed, and how that's still going?
Oh my goodness, I'll deal with that bit in a minute. I can't quite. I mean, in terms of advice, I mean, I think, yes, we've been talking about it already, staying open. I mean, I'm aware that my natural tendency is to reach out and want to connect. And I think that is hugely important, but I think it's also about then how you listen to yourself, how you value your own experience, how you trust your own experience. And so you bring that to new encounters, new opportunities. It's that balance that I've not always had, but I've learned over the years, that I think is key, because the answers aren't always out there. Some of them are inside. We need both, don't we?
That's great. And as I watch you on screen here, I can feel you're moving every time you say something that's about reaching out. I can feel the body and the energy moving. It's quite inherent within how you've obviously grown. But when we're talking about it's not always on the outside, there is some about the outside that actually, if you could make any changes right now regarding our industry, this is probably my final question. What do you think would be the things that you would want to have different? I mean, we've had the pandemic, of course, and so forth, but what do you feel would be a great change for us right now?
Well, it's a huge question, and you're right. We're in a time of absolute change, and times are hard. I think radical change is really what we need. And this comes to what I was going to say earlier, is that I have decided to step down from my role. I only gave the notice last week, so it's really fresh. But for the last 3 years, since the pandemic, we had, on the back of the pandemic was so stressful, wasn't it? And on the back of the first lockdown, we recruited a disabled associate director, and the environment that they came into was so stressful that they left quite quickly, and were quite brutal about they felt that it was an ableist environment, that the stress we were navigating felt ableist. And that really was like devastating. But I could see where it was coming from. And so the last 2 years, me and the interim co-leader, Nikki Napier, have been really trying to make sure that we're undoing which we've been really going through a process of systemic change, transformation, turning over every stone, looking at policies, practices, procedures, language, attitudes. We've been really like at the coalface, and it's been exhausting.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But really, really, it felt like something that we had to do, and to secure the next 30 years. And so we set a really clear intention for the future. And so when we went to recruitment for a disabled co-AD a few weeks ago, I realized that there were many people in the room that could do the job.
Okay.
If I leave now, there's a chance that 2 disabled co-directors could come in. And I do think that is what we need.
Wow, that's really commendable. Not because it's, you've obviously done the work, but as you say, the ability to step into those shoes and realize that systemic change is needed, that's massive for a company. How long has the company been running?
Since 91, so 3 years. Wow. And that's why it's so hard. Change is so hard when you've got history that long, and you've got patterns of working, and of course you've got loads of experience and expertise. So yeah, it's been, I think the process of transformation is only halfway there. We've just begun the work and put a very clear sort of intention to be more radically accessible, to be as sort of pioneering now as we were 33 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think it needs new energy, new lived experience, new vision to actually embody that and drive it forward. I really do.
And so it's time sensitive that we're having this conversation, really, isn't it?
I know, I nearly didn't do it. But actually, I know, but I actually really valued the prompt to reflect back, because you know, it's a new chapter for me too now, and I've really appreciated the opportunity to sort of look back and, okay, what was formative, and how do I want to, what do I want to do next? You know,
Is that okay to ask that question? What do you want to do next, or is that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, one of the things that was key was that when I left Laban and before this role, I did a training with Linda Hartley called Integrative Bodywork and Movement Therapy. And I did it mostly for myself because I'd picked up some injuries and some stresses along the way. But it was an incredible resource for me. And I wouldn't have been able to lead the organization through this period if I hadn't done that training. So I think that's what's drawing me. It's like, I need to, you know, I need some time to feel into the next bit. I honestly don't know, but I'm confident that I've got kind of resources and connections, and I feel very lucky that I've got some, you know, choices, I guess.
Which ultimately you don't necessarily know those choices are there for you till you get to a crossroad like this, when
Yeah,
you get to make those decisions and understand what you've collected along the way. So, I mean, it is absolutely fantastic, and I don't doubt that we'll see your worth in other areas because of the knowledge and expertise that you have. It's not something you're going to disappear with. We, as an industry, we need that. We need that to stay with us. So I do hope that that comes out in another direction for us to be able to tap into.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure, Charlotte. And I'm going to just bring this interview to a close and say thank you very much for your contributions over 30 odd years. And that's just in terms of one direction, but I think the holistic approach to what you're doing is amazing. And yeah, we thank you. At the Northern School, absolutely appreciate what you've been doing and hopefully what you'll continue to do. That will help us all.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And thank you to you and to Northern. It's really huge influence on my life and work. Yeah.